You didn't forget the milk, cause the delay, or ruin the weekend plans, but here you are, somehow the one being blamed again. Whether it's a partner, friend, or parent, being on the receiving end of blame is frustrating, confusing, and downright crazy making. It's like they've outsourced their emotional homework to you and you're the one getting detention. Well, today we'll unpack why some people love to point the finger, how it warps your relationships, and what you can do about it without turning into the jerk they accuse you of being. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dr. Abby Medcalf, and as always, we have a good one today. I am going to give you all of it, the 5 steps and how to get over this and how to get through it. I had a lot of people write in. Thank you when you write in asking for this topic. So let's get to it. I want to start with the psychology of blame. You know, why people point the finger, because as you know, on this podcast, I always give context and sort of all the pieces so you can really psychologically understand something. You know, when you just jump to, well, what do I do? And that's what most people seem to want. Well, just tell me what to do. Well, the problem is if you don't really understand the why, you're not going to value the what, the how. And so that is why I give you all of it. So those of you, and I know my listeners are smart. I mean, that's who listens. If you're downloading me, it's because you want the research, you want evidence-based, and here we are. So why do people point the finger? You know, and blame isn't just about avoiding responsibility. It is a survival strategy, and it's usually unconscious and definitely deeply rooted in shame. When someone experiences a failure or emotional discomfort, their brain instinctively tries to make sense of it. So for emotionally mature people, this means self-reflecting and then adjusting, okay? So if you have emotional maturity, a higher emotional EQ, we call it, a higher emotional intelligence, you're going to self-reflect. You're going to think, what am I doing here? Why am I, you're going to do that, and then you're going to adjust. But for chronic blamers, it means deflecting that discomfort away from themselves as quickly as possible. So, so here's what that blaming provides for them. It provides an avoidance of shame and guilt. Remember, that's really where it's rooted, because blame lets them off the hook emotionally. So instead of thinking, oh, I messed up, they think, well, you made me do it, right? Okay. The second thing it does is there's a preservation of your self-image. You know, everyone has an image of themselves, how they see themselves in the world, how they think they are in the world, and blame keeps them from facing their flaws, which can feel intolerable somehow, especially if their identity is sort of fragile, which is usually, to me, blaming people have a more fragile ego. It also gives them a sense of control. If you're the problem, they don't have to change. So it reinforces sort of a false sense of superiority or victimhood, depending on the flavor of the blame. It does any of that. And the thing I talk about probably more than anything is that in my experience, again, 40 years of doing this, I've been around a really long time in a variety of settings in different states in the United States and different countries. And I will tell you that being a victim is at the core of a lot of your problems, and you don't even realize it, that because it's so baked into especially American culture that there's always someone to point the finger at. Our current political climate really speaks to that, blaming someone for, if I don't have a job or I'm not making money, who do I blame for that? How do I put that on other people? And as you can see from who got elected, that a lot of people like that. They like to think that it's about someone else, that there's someone else to blame in their life, that there's something to be afraid of, that there's someone outside of themselves. And here on this podcast, we are never about fear. We are about love and really taking responsibility. Now, not too much. That's codependency. And, I talk about that in different ways, but definitely leaning out of that idea that anything you're feeling is someone else's fault. So I think the victimhood is a biggie for a lot of people. So studies have found that people are more likely to blame others when their own sense of control is threatened. That's what we know from the research. And there's also something called self-serving bias. It's a term coined in social psychology that shows how people tend to credit themselves for successes, but blame others for failure as a way to protect their self-esteem, right? And whenever I say the research, for any of my new listeners, you can find that on my website, in the blog. That's part of this. And we are changing the website so that things are easier. You don't have to go to a separate page for the blog and the podcast. So I'm not sure if by the time you're listening to that, hopefully that's changed, but it'll be changed soon. You can also, if you're listening on, YouTube, links are under the video, and please like and subscribe if you are on YouTube. And I'm on Substack now. I love Substack, by the way. I am so into it. All of my blogs are posted on Substack. So if you're on Substack, you can just subscribe to me and you'll just get them. And then all the links to everything are there. So anytime I say anything and I link, that's where it is. So, you can just believe me but if you don't, or you like to do the research yourself, which I love, you can go and see all the articles and check it out for yourself. So let me say this, people who blamers aren't necessarily manipulative or cruel. I think most of them are just emotionally immature or emotionally underdeveloped. And I know that can sound harsh, but I got to tell you, I think this is more and more of an issue with the advent of social media and now AI, that people are getting farther and farther from dealing with other people, I think especially since the pandemic. And I know that when we see research 10 years from now, there's already research starting on this, but we haven't been doing it long enough yet, that people are really learning to step back. I mean, I know people who get like a DoorDash order and don't even want to talk to the person delivering their food. So say, leave it on the porch. I don't even want to see you. I mean, we have just gotten so good at being 3 steps away from physically talking to people, obviously remote work, all kinds of things. And I'm not downing remote work or anything else, or I'm not, teasing, getting on you if you're one of those people who doesn't want to talk to the DoorDash person. But I'm telling you that every time you do any of these things, you are separating yourself from other people and you are losing the skills that are so important that happen face to face. I just really want to say that. I do all my therapy remotely. So, some people would say that's crazy. You can't do good therapy remotely. So I get it. I'm not, all my clients that I see are remote. I have clients I've been working with for years who I've never met. And we do really great work. So I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying there needs to be a mix. If your entire life is so separated, that's to me more of the problem. But anyway, so when I talk about emotionally immature or emotionally underdeveloped, maybe that's a way to say it that you might feel more comfortable with. That's what I'm talking about. So people may have grown up in homes where admitting mistakes meant punishment or shame, right? Like in the house I grew up in, I shared before, my mom had narcissistic personality disorder. And so, you wanted to hide any mistake you made. Trust me, you wanted to hide anything that wasn't perfection. And I did. So I grew up in a house like that where everything was everyone else's fault. We always say we teach what we need to learn. And I'll tell you, the reason I probably talk so much about not acting like a victim is because that's what I did in the first, many years of my life. I didn't understand what I'm teaching you and what I teach, obviously, all my clients and do with my clients, and what I know now from the research. I didn't know. I thought like everyone else. Oh, it's everyone else's fault. You're supposed to blame other people. And not ever admit a mistake or say you don't know, or, I even find myself doing that sometimes. Someone will tell me something that I don't know and I go, oh, I know. I don't know. And then most of the time, I think, because I'm mindful, I catch myself and I'm like, I'm sorry, I did not know that. I don't know why. It's so automatic though. It comes out even for me, someone who's been doing this for so long, right? Even for me. So that's why the mindfulness is so important. And if you have not downloaded my mindfulness starter kit by now, which is free, I don't know what you're waiting on, because everything I talk about, I'll talk about something more later in today's episode related to mindfulness. So Really, it's free. It's free. Just download it. So I think for a lot of people in their homes, they couldn't admit that they made a mistake. So again, there was punishment, there was shame. So they learned that the safest move was to always have a scapegoat handy, right? So examples of kind of blaming behavior that might be in your world today. Maybe your partner gets a parking ticket and says, well, if you hadn't distracted me, I would have fed the meter or something, right? Or your coworker misses a deadline but says, well, you didn't remind me it was due. Your sibling snaps at you and then says, well, you just always know how to push my buttons. Do you see this? Do you see this very subtle ways that, right, you're to blame for someone else's behavior or, again, underdeveloped or immature reactions? And, of course, I grew up with parents and other adults who, said things like, you drive me crazy or look what you made me do. Oh, Taylor Swift came out with that song and I was so sad. I was like, oh, no. I love Taylor, but that song made me very sad that people were like, it was like reinforcing this idea that someone else made you do something. But anyway, so in all these cases, the other person puts responsibility outside themselves and someone else becomes the container for their emotions, their mistakes, their failures. And of course, that someone is, often you. So let's talk about how blame affects you, how being on the receiving end of blame, it doesn't just make you frustrated. Over time, being on the receiving end of blame really chips away at your own self-trust, your ability to trust yourself and your emotional stability. You might start second guessing yourself constantly. You might replay conversations, late at night, wondering how you became the villain. What I see a lot of in my clients is you start over apologizing, over explaining. You go into fixer mode because you just want to calm the waters. So, and those are the common reactions I see to chronic blame. I see people pleasing. Right? Fawning, I've even talked about, and I did a whole episode on fawning. If you don't know about fawning, there's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Pete Walker coined that term years ago, and that is really a trauma response that's like excessive people pleasing. You're trying to head off the next accusation by anticipating their moods or their needs, that kind of thing. The other thing I see is hypervigilance. You walk on eggshells. You're always scanning for signs that something might go wrong. Another problem is self-abandonment, meaning that you minimize your needs or your emotions just to keep the peace. And then, of course, gaslighting yourself. You can start gaslighting yourself because this is how your self-trust goes. Oh, maybe it was my fault. Even when you kind of know it wasn't, but you just start wondering, maybe I am crazy. Maybe it is. Maybe I am the problem. And over time, you become more focused on avoiding blame than building connection. And so you're not in a friendship or a partnership or a, colleague, equal relationship. You're just in reaction mode, and that is not a good thing. So one of the ways you can spot this pattern is through something I call like a verb kind of framework, VERB, that stands for, it's an acronym. And so because I think it's important to spot the pattern before it drags you in, right? And VERB is a great framework for that. When someone is stuck in a chronic blame cycle, they're often, usually, I'm going to say always, but almost always showing kind of a cluster of traits, not just blame, but a whole kind of mindset that makes healthy communication really impossible. And that's why I want you to be able to look for it. So VERB stands for victim, acting like a victim, acting entitled, thinking that you can read minds or that they can read your mind or vice versa, and blame. And so let me just let me break that down for you really quick. I've talked about verb before. I use different acronyms because I'm a crazy gal. I've talked about crave, and I use different ones. So depending on how long you've been listening to me, you might be like, Abby, you've already said this, but something else. I know. I use different ones. I'm allowed. So verb, V-E-R-B, acting like a victim. So that's if they see the world is always doing something to them, they don't take responsibility because everything is everyone else's fault. I wouldn't be in this position if you hadn't made me feel so unsupported or something, right? So when someone is, and by the way, this could be you acting this way. So let me be clear, okay? Any of this, if the V, the E, the R, or the B, sometimes people have all four, sometimes it's just one or two or three, but any of these, this is an unhealthy conversation that's going nowhere, okay? So the E is entitled. They expect emotional or logistical favors without having to ask. They act entitled. So, and if you don't deliver, you're considered, you're inconsiderate, right? That's how they see it. I shouldn't have to tell you I needed help. I needed help with this. Or you should respect me because I'm your mother. I'm the breadwinner around here, so I demand whatever. This is this entitlement. And that kind of leads into usually reading minds. That's when they assign kind of motives to your behavior, usually negative ones, or believe you should know exactly what they're thinking. You didn't know, but you knew I didn't want to go, but you invited me anyway. That was manipulative. Or you should know what I want for my birthday by now. That's one of my favorites. I shouldn't have to tell you what I want for our anniversary. You should know. You knew that was going to upset me. You knew that was going to make me mad. That kind of thing, right? So yeah, that's that reading minds. And you can't do it either. I knew what they were going to say, so I didn't say it. So I don't have to say it. Yeah, I know. Right now you're going, oh, I've said that. I know you have. I knew what they were thinking. And I know right now your argument is, but Abby, I'm right. I'm always right. You're right because of other reasons, right? That's confirmation bias. That's your RAS. That's other things that are making you quote unquote right. So let's get clear about it, right? Do you remember? Okay. That's other podcasts. You can search for those keywords on my website if you're unsure what I'm talking about. But if you've been with me for a while, you know that you see a reality through a lens of what you believe. So you're not as right as you think you are. And then the B, so VERB, the blame. When anything uncomfortable happens, their first instinct is to put it on you. This whole thing got messed up because of how you handled it, that kind of thing. And that verb mindset, it's not just difficult, it is emotionally unsafe. It's like trying to have a collaborative conversation with someone who's emotionally drunk. That's how I always compare it. When you're talking to a drunk person and they seem to be talking back to you, maybe they've had a few drinks, they're buzzed, or maybe even drunk sometimes, but you almost can't tell, or you're trying to have some, I see this all the time. I'll see someone talking to someone who's drinking and having some big argument. I'm like, what are you talking to them for? They're justifying things, they're rationalizing things. They're not in their right mind. Their judgment is severely affected. That's the first thing that gets affected when you drink, right? Or smoke pot or whatever. Your judgment gets affected. So that's why you think you're such a good driver when you're drinking, that kind of thing. So you can't connect with someone who isn't grounded in reality and isn't willing to meet you halfway. So when you see any one of those verb behaviors, stop the conversation because it's not going to be productive anyway. Just stop it. Okay. Actually, before I jump into the 5 steps to responding without getting sucked in, if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is so me. If this is an area you really need to work on, I want to lovingly encourage you to either get, I have my Boundaries Made Easy book or the Boundaries Made Easy or workbook. If you're watching on YouTube, they're right behind me. Those books I'm really proud of them. They're really great. If you don't mind spending some money, it's going to hold your hand and really help you go deep. And there's also, I have a therapy to go bundle with every episode of season 8 and that you can download for $10, which I will So if you can do this work with your therapist, or you can do it on your own, have your own therapy and go deep on this topic. There's worksheets and journaling prompts and all kinds of great stuff. There's even a guided visualization in this one, in this particular Therapy to Go bundle. So if you want to go deeper, I'll talk about that at the very end. Just listen till the very end. If not, you don't have to listen to the end. So let's talk about the 5 steps to respond without getting sucked in. How's that? That's what I'm going to call this. The 5 steps to respond without getting sucked in. I just made that up. This is where you get your power back, okay? Because I know you feel helpless sometimes in the face of blame, but you're not. But you do need to respond strategically, especially if you're someone dealing with, especially if you're dealing, with someone who isn't self-aware or emotionally flexible, again, or having sort of a higher emotional intelligence and EQ like you do, you're developing, which is probably feels like most of the people in your life. I know, we've all been there. So let's talk about it. I'm going to have a sip of my water. Hold on. All right. Step 1, name the pattern to yourself, by the way, not to them, to yourself. This isn't about telling them something. It's about telling yourself something. Before you respond, you need to recognize what's happening. This isn't just a one-off complaint. It's a dynamic. And knowing that helps you detach from the, we'll call it emotional bait that the person is putting out there. You're going to need, what did I say earlier, to be mindful to see this happening. So you have to practice mindfulness daily. Again, download the Mindfulness Starter Kit. Enough. Just do it. Everything I talk about in the podcast, I could teach you every great tool in the world. If you don't remember to use it in the moment, it's useless to you. Get it? That's why mindfulness is at the corner of everything. There's whole chapters in my book about it. Both books. The earlier book too, Be Happily Married Even If Your Partner Won't Do a Thing. An Amazon #1 bestseller. Thank you very much. I'm very proud. In that book too, I have whole chapters of mindfulness in each book. Much more extended chapter in the boundaries book, but because you need to know it. But if you don't want to spend a penny, search the keyword boundaries on my website. Tons of free stuff. Okay. So I'm always here for you. If you want to spend money, I'll walk you through it. I'll hold your hand. If you don't want to spend money, free stuff everywhere. Step 2 is to avoid the reflex to defend. Your nervous system might want to jump into self-protection, right? I didn't do that. That's not fair. But that's going to fuel the fire. You know that, right? And here's the crazy part. It makes you look guilty. It makes you look like the jerk. It makes you look combative. I know we've all been there, right? Where suddenly we're like, wait a minute, how did this get flipped? And there's research on this. It shows that defensive responses escalate conflict and really end up reinforcing the blame dynamics. So don't do it. Staying calm and reflective will keep you out of the drama loop. So, I hear that you're upset. I'd like to understand, but blaming me isn't helpful. That kind of thing. And I have a free download for today of scripts. I'll talk about it in a minute, but to really help you through this, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Step 3 is to use I statements with boundaries. Okay. So when you need to redirect or hold the line, you got to use clear language that really centers your experience without attacking the other person. I want to talk about this, but not if I'm being blamed for everything. Or I'm open to hearing your frustration, but I'm not okay with being the target, right? And again, a true boundary would have teeth at the end of that, right? I'm open to talking about this, but I'm not okay with being the target. And if the conversation continues this way, I'm going to end it. Do you see, like the teeth part is what you're going to do if they don't kind of come along. And again, I do this great in a lot of the Therapy to Go bundle. I go deep on how to do this in that and in the free download. So, at least get the free download. Step 4 is to ask clarifying questions, but I want to say this, but don't become their therapist. So blame is often a cover for an unmet need or an unspoken expectation. So if the person seems open, you can gently steer them toward that insight, right? You know, I love for you to ask collaborative questions, right? I talk about that all the time. Don't sack your relationships, SAC. Don't offer suggestions, give advice, or criticize. And instead, ask questions. And one of my favorite ones from this can be like, what are you really needing from me right now? What are you really needing from me right now? And they might say, well, I just need you to listen, or, you know, I need you to understand that you're whatever. And you can say, that's blame. What do you need from me right now? Is there something I could do right now? Is there one thing I could do right now? Not something. Always say, is there one thing I could do right now to help us move forward? Is there one thing I could say right now to help us move forward? And see what if they say, well, you need to apologize, you can say, yeah, I don't think I did anything wrong. Let's keep talking. What else do you need? What are you looking for? You know, another question that's great here. Can you talk about what you were hoping would happen when you're getting blame, right? Can you like steer them towards what we were looking for and away from the blame? That's another one I really like. Can we talk about what you were hoping would happen? But again, don't fall into the trap of trying to fix their feelings or convincing them to change. That is not your job. Okay. But you know, trying to open the conversation if they seem willing is I think can be a great thing. And step 5 is to really know when to disengage. If the conversation stays stuck in that finger pointing or spirals into any kind of emotional attacks, you have every right to walk away. Do not stay in it. Okay? And there's research about this. There is research in boundary setting and emotional regulation. And that talks about this something we call strategic disengagement. And it is one of the this is for, this research is in political arenas. It is in emotional arenas, you know, personal relationships, work, it's everywhere. And strategic disengagement is one of the most effective ways to stop enabling harmful relational patterns, right? You can say, this conversation isn't feeling productive right now. We can come back to it later, right? And walk away. And let me see if I can give you some more examples. I know you're going to want more examples. I get that sometimes people will write in and go, could you give more examples? Let's say your partner says, this dinner is ruined because of your bad mood. You can say, I hear you're disappointed. I'd rather talk about how we're both feeling without assigning blame. Right? Maybe not even I'd rather. I'll only speak to you about this, about how we're both feeling without assigning blame, something like that. You could say I'd rather if you want to, you know, soften it a little. Your friend says, oh, you made me feel stupid in front of everybody. You could say, wow, that wasn't my intention, never say but. And I'm open to hearing more about how you felt. I'd appreciate it if we can keep this about feelings and not accusations. See that? Is shifting it, letting them know. Maybe your boss is blaming you for something. This mistake happened because you didn't double check the file, right? You know, you never, or they might even say because you never double check the file. You can say, I'm happy to take responsibility for my part. And not but, and let's look at how we can prevent this going forward without focusing on fault. Right? See that? I know. So again, I have a free download for today, which is blame-proof boundaries. I get very specific 10 scripts to use when someone's pointing the finger. Okay, so you can download that again below the video on Substack. If you're reading the blog there, if you go to my website, any of those places, you can download that. And to be very transparent, when you download anything from me that's free, like the Mindfulness Starter Kit or this, you will be put on my love letter list, which is you will get 2 emails a month that are not selling you a thing. That's not what I do in the love letter. The love letter is meant to inspire you. People love the love letter. I just need to tell you, there's thousands and thousands of people on there and more people on there all the time because that's all it is. It's a little story. It's meant to be read in a few minutes. It's a little, I don't know, some angle, something I'm thinking about to help you hopefully feel inspired in your week or different in your time. If you love it, if you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I want this inspiration every week, you can pay. But again, you're not going to get emails asking you to pay or follow-ups like, hey, don't forget to pay. Like nothing like that. I don't do that. Okay. I just don't do it. If you've been following me for a while, you know that. And if you've already downloaded something and you're already on the list, don't worry. It's not like you're going to get added over and over. And you can unsubscribe at any time. I'm not going to notice. Okay. I'm not going to notice. So I just want to be transparent. Okay. I know. I'm just trying to get you. I am, because you're like, well, why do you do it then, Abby? If it's not to sell us something, it's because I am really trying to change the world. Go look at my mission on my website. Go look at the About Me page. I'm really trying, and this is one of the ways I do it. All right. And then I would say, ask yourself, I'm going to give you 5 questions to ask yourself when you're feeling blamed. Okay. Because sometimes I say with love, 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 you know, I love you. Sometimes the biggest shift starts with you. We both know that's not sometimes. We both know that's almost always. The biggest shift starts with you. You know that, right? One of the most pain needs to change first. If you keep finding yourself in blaming dynamics, if this is something that's sounding so familiar to you, it happens at home, it happens at work, or it just happens in very key relationships, you need to take a moment to check your own patterns. So I'm going to give you 5 questions to ask yourself. One is, am I taking responsibility for something that isn't mine? This is what I do with my clients when they're, in these kind of situations. That's the first thing I ask them. Are you taking responsibility for something that isn't yours? You should really ask yourself that and go deep. The second question is this person ever willing to own their part, or do they always need a villain? And maybe the villain isn't always you, but you see it everywhere. Like they never, I hate to say never, always a never, right? But they seem to never, own their own part. And it seems like someone else is generally cast as a villain, and they're the victim. The third question to ask yourself is, have I clearly communicated my boundaries and expectations? Have I been clear about that? And again, back to the boundaries. I know it's why I wrote a book about it. Boundaries are so important. Boundaries and mindfulness. Once you get that, you're home free. I'm telling you right now. And again, remember, a boundary isn't a wish or a want. I know a lot of you are saying, well, I've set my boundaries. I told them I don't like that. That is not a boundary. That is not a boundary. To say what you wish, that's a wish. That's a wish that you're throwing out there. Without the teeth part, it's not a boundary. Okay. And again, go look all that up if you want. The fourth question I want you to ask yourself is, do I feel like I'm constantly explaining or justifying myself? That's another problem. That should be a big red flag to you. And the fifth question is, and I want you to be open to hearing this, what is your unconscious payoff? What's the unconscious payoff I might be getting from staying in this dynamic? I know. That might be a deep cut, okay? But sometimes we stay in blaming relationships because they're familiar. Because we've learned that absorbing blame keeps the peace. Because that, believe it or not, that's what feels like love, or like how it's supposed to be. There's a lot of reasons, and it's really important that you sort of look at yourself in there. So what are my final thoughts? You're not a dumping ground. That's my final thought. Blame is very seductive for the person doing it. I'll tell you that. It relieves their guilt. It boosts their feelings of control, and it keeps their ego intact, right? It keeps their sense of self intact. But for the person receiving it, it's like being emotionally waterboarded. It's bad. So, and you don't need to stay in a dynamic that asks you to shrink, self-doubt, or overfunction to keep someone else comfortable. You're allowed to expect mature, collaborative communication. You're allowed to say, I'm not your villain. Okay? You're allowed, because love, respect, and partnership in your relationships, none of that lives in blame. It lives in accountability. It lives in mutual care, and emotional courage. And I'm going to drop the mic right there. No, I'm not going to drop the mic. I have an expensive mic. So I'm just going to say, I think that says it all, right? Remember to download, the free download today, Blame Proof Boundaries, 10 scripts to use when someone's pointing the finger. And then I'm going to talk about what's in the Therapy to Go bundle. This is something that my One Love Collective gets. That's my One Love Collective is now on Substack. We moved over from Patreon, and we have been on Substack since July, and I'm loving it. I love Substack. I'm really into it over there. If you don't know, it's a social media thing. And if you want to buy the Therapy to Go bundle, it's $10 for everything I'm about to say, which is quite the deal. But otherwise, you could join the One Love Collective for $8 a month, and you get live Q&As with me. You get every single Therapy to Go bundle for every single, which always includes the free download, by the way, so it's easy. For every episode that month, you get a community, you get early drops, you get ad-free podcasts. I mean, you get so much for $8 because I'm trying to do something here, trying to help people really feel better. So the One Love Collective is getting, am I being blamed or am I being asked for help? It's kind of a clarity checklist for decoding, blame disguises. There are also blame resilience journaling prompts. There's a letter to myself when I'm not the problem. It's kind of how to reclaim your center after someone tries to drag you off of it. There's a name it, frame it, boundary worksheet. There's a 5-minute blame release reset. And there's a VERB self-test. Is this person emotionally safe to communicate with? It's like a little test. I think it's really good. It took me a while to create that. And then there's this guided imagery for releasing blame that's not yours. So all of that is included. I know, it's a lot. And if you don't know, last but not least, I am starting Workplace Therapy with Dr. Abby Medcalf, a new podcast in October. And I'm really excited about it. It's going to be just 15 minutes. It's going to be quick. It's going to be very different than this. I'm going to be standing. I'm in a little studio I created at my house in my dining room. And it's going to be all about work and things to do, tips for work. It's going to be kind of like one tip. It's going to be much shorter than this, 15 minutes or so, me doing a teach with a tip and a tool you can have to take for your work life. So I hope you'll come over there and listen to that. And I think that's all the things. I think I've said all the things. So I really hope this particular episode helped you. Because the blame stuff is just the worst. It's such a cancer in your relationships, and it's really important to stop it. All right. Mwah. I love you so much. Thank you for being here with me. And wow, staying to the end. Look at you, A++. Have an amazing week, and I'll talk to you real soon.